Last year, I took on the challenge, which I've done 3 years in my 46 years, of reading the Bible from cover to cover in 1 year. And I'm sure those of you who have done it before will realise that you get something out of the Scriptures in a different way than normal if you do it that way. But I pace myself. I do it differently in different years. And this year I discovered another pastor of mine sent out these different Bible reading plans. And I saw this one and I thought it was really, really interesting. It was 5 by 5 by 5. Put your hand up if you heard of the 5 by 5 by 5. One person. Okay, the 5 by 5 by 5. Let me tell you, it only goes through the New Testament. And the really interesting thing is, it's easy. If you think, the whole concept of reading the whole Bible in 1 year is daunting, this is a good first step to doing that, to do the whole New Testament. And it does it in a really interesting way. What it does is you read for 5 minutes a day, just one chapter. 5 minutes roughly, 5 to 7 minutes, one chapter a day. And you only do it for 5 days a week. So on the Sunday, of course, you're getting the Scriptures here. And on the Saturday, you might have your day of rest, your Sabbath day on the Saturday. So it's only 5 days. And you get to ask 5 questions of yourself, of God, and of the Scriptures. It's really good. For instance, the first question, you're encouraged to underline key words, things that jump out at you. I hope all of you have got a Bible, a second Bible, if you've got one primary Bible and a second Bible, that you can actually do underlines or highlights in. If you don't, grab another Bible and while you're reading, highlight things. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing you do is, when you read it, after you've finished reading it, see if you can say the whole thing or a summary of it in your own words. Doing that will help you process it in a different way. The third thing is ask questions of it. I wonder what this person was feeling. Or how can this happen if this happens? It will help you process it. It will help you understand it and will help you retain it. And number 4, ask yourself, what is the big idea that's being communicated today? Is there one big idea, one big theme that I'm learning? And the next one fits in with that. Respond to God. God, what are you challenging me on today? To a certain extent, this is what I hope you do with the Sunday sermon each week. But this is what you can do with Scripture every day. Believe it or not, how many of you believe in this great Baptist thing called the priesthood of all believers? Do you realise that I am not your priest? Jesus is your high priest. Jesus is your priest. We as individuals have been given an opportunity to access God directly. He has given you His word. You can actually read it and you can say, God, are you speaking to me? Not through someone else necessarily, but are you speaking to me today? What are you saying to me? Well, believe it or not, I started a bit late. I started only 2 weeks ago. And as soon as I started doing this, their way, some things jumped out at me and I thought I'd like to share it with you. I got so excited about Scripture. How many of you occasionally get excited about Scripture? Yeah? A couple of you enthusiastically. Sometimes things jump out and I was thinking, wow, I've got to share this. And I hope when you read Scripture you think, wow, I've got to share this. And you do share it with the people that you meet during the day. I'm possibly setting a good example for you. I just thought that up just then. Okay. The story. There are 4 stories that started for me this week, and I noticed that there's 4 stories and they culminate in something at the end. Now, I'm going to share one of those stories with you this week, another the next week, another. You're going to hear 4 different sermons, all based around the 4 different stories, and then the last sermon of the 4 is going to be the culmination as well. Now, the first one, and they're all miracles. The first one is a story about how Jesus calmed the storm. Can anybody remember that one? How Jesus calmed the storm? Not the time he walked on water, but this is the time he calmed the storm. Let me go through it with you, if you like. Okay, so first of all, we have Jesus. Let's get rid of those boats. Jesus had been teaching in a boat. Now, it's great because they didn't have amphitheatres, or at least the Romans didn't let them hire it. Graham, the Romans didn't let them use the facilities for what God wanted to use. So they had to think creatively. So what did they do? Jesus got out in a boat, and the water actually is great for acoustics. So they surrounded him on the shore, and he spoke from a boat. He continued, because they wanted to hear more and more and more, so Jesus kept on talking and talking, late into the evening. And as you can appreciate, you get pretty tired after talking. I get tired after talking for 20 to 30 minutes. I don't know how Jesus talked all day, but he did. And seeing the throngs of people, it goes like this. He said to his disciples, let's go over to the other side. Can you imagine 100 or 1,000 people here, and you're thinking, we're out in the boat, we've got to get back, and then I'm going to plough my way through the crowd. And from what we read of other passages of scriptures, everybody wanted to touch him, everybody wanted to hold him, everybody wanted to talk to him possibly, and everybody wanted to interact with him. And so he thought, I think it's time for me to rest. And he was really good. His work-life balance was really good. Jesus knew how to do it. So he said to his disciples, he probably thought, that's not the best direction. Let's go over the other side. Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. As in, no going home for a change of clothes. No going back to Peter's mum and saying, we're going out for an adventure tonight. We're going that direction. No. They decided to go out. Now, in contrast to Gilligan's Island, there were several boats. There were several boats at the time. And the funny thing is, we don't know what happened to those other boats. We only know what happened to Jesus and the disciples. They could have just shot through. But it's interesting to know that in 1986, did anybody hear about this? In 1986, a group of amateur archaeologists dug up a boat that was of that period and of a similar style of fishing boat, and they actually have it in a museum. And so you can go and see the style of boat, or at least what's left of the style of boat, that Jesus might have been in on that very occasion. And this, wouldn't it be incredible if this was one of those other boats? The story continues. A furious squall came up. Now, I understand this is actually a photo of Galilee, the shore of Galilee, and some of the waves that go splashing out of the Sea of Galilee. They have up to 180 kilometre an hour winds and up to 3 metre waves. Anybody here been in 3 metre waves? Anybody been here on the Spirit of Tasmania going over? I have. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. I was lying down in a bed and I completely lifted up every time. I was flying in the air and then pressed my face down into the bed. Anyway, these fishermen, they knew how to handle this 8 metre long boat. They were experienced fishermen. But many Bible scholars say that this storm was different. Now, I'll emphasise, the Bible scholars, in reading it, not me, Bible scholars, real Bible scholars, read, and they say this storm was not a normal, natural storm. If experienced sailors were afraid for their lives, some evil might have been driving this storm. So let's trust these sailors and imagine that we too were scared witless as we were travelling in this little 8 metre boat along the Sea of Galilee. So, the waves were breaking over the boat. It was really, really stormy, so that the boat was nearly swamped. This sea was up to 43 metres deep, 21 kilometres long and 13 kilometres wide. They were possibly somewhere, they probably couldn't see the shore. It was dark, it was stormy, they were afraid. So one night, the violent storm came along. This is not my idea of fun. I would be freaking out. I get pretty seasick. Put your hand up if you get seasick. Yeah, lots of you can imagine. Just the thought of it makes me start to feel a bit seasick. In contrast to the violence around them, Jesus was in the back sleeping on a cushion. Isn't that nice? My wife actually says sometimes, James, you're so Christ-like. I wonder if it's because I can sleep through when Simon comes in and wakes her up. The disciples woke him up. I wonder how they woke him up. Whether they just said, Jesus? No. Violent storm. Jesus! Jesus, wake up! And said to him, Teacher! It's interesting. They did what my son Simon sometimes does. They don't say, could you come and have a look at this? There's something wrong. Straight away, the expectations, the assumptions come in. Teacher, don't you care if we drown? I like that line. It shows how in the moment they were. Of course, he cared if they drowned. The things people say when they're in a crisis. Hey, tell me, how do you react when you are in a crisis? Anybody ever been in a crisis? Things were completely out of control. And you're completely out of your depth. Excuse the pun. Some people freeze when they are in a crisis. Some people panic when they are in a crisis. I've seen people faint when they are in a crisis situation. I've seen them throw up because of the anxiety and the build-up. Rather than taking strategic action, most people react rather than act. My brother-in-law is a first aid instructor, and he knows that the more first aid instructions you get, the yearly or bi-yearly or every 5 year, the more of these you do, the more it becomes second nature for you to respond in the correct way. It becomes natural to you. The more you practice, the better you get. Once or twice I've been in one of those situations where I was the man on the spot in a crisis. I was walking past a friend's office. I was going in to visit a friend of mine, and I opened the door, and there he was getting electrocuted. He was lying down on the floor with a microphone in one hand and some what looked like speaker wires in the other hand, and he was just going on the ground. Well, I'm glad to say, because I was in an earlier life, I was trained to be an electronics technician. We got it pounded into us what to do in those situations. So I knew what to do. I knew to assess the area, not just go and say, "Hey, what are you doing?" Getting electrocuted as well. So I knew to go and turn the power off, and what I did first, saw him there, called to the receptionist, "Quick, call the ambulance." Then assessed the situation, flicked the power off, went over, made sure, touched him with the back of my hand to make sure that he wasn't, make sure he wasn't live. But to make sure he was alive, I did what was necessary to make sure that he was breathing and to make sure that he was in a comfortable position until the ambulance people came. I've been trained to do these things. So, after a few seconds of shock, I did what was necessary. Getting back to the story. Oh, by the way, I waited until the ambulance came. Getting back to the story. Better later than never, the 12 disciples called the ambulance. They called the master for some input. They thought, let's go straight to someone who can help us. Okay, so at this stage, the 12 had seen Jesus. They'd seen him heal the sick. In the weeks before, they'd seen him heal the sick. They'd seen him cast out demons. What? Supernatural things. They'd seen him teach like nobody else that they'd ever seen teach. But they hadn't seen this side of Jesus, the one that had authority even over nature itself. So they didn't think that he could do anything. It wasn't in their repertoire of thinking that he could actually do anything here. What were they expecting? I wonder if they were expecting him to at least join in the panic. Or at least help bail out the boat. An extra hand, the The 13th person. Is that a cricketing term, the 13th man? I'm not so sure. He got up, possibly irritated, and he did two things. What two things did he do? Jesus got up and did two things. Here he is. Got up and did two things. He, number one, rebuked the wind. And number two, he said to the waves, "Quiet! Be still." So, does anybody know what the word rebuke means? Rebuke. I looked it up just to make sure I knew what it meant too. It means to reprimand. To reprimand. To tell off for something wrong. To strongly warn. And another interesting thing, it means to restrain. To reprimand something means to restrain something. To hold it back. To stop it from doing what it was in the direction of doing. What does to quiet mean? It means to settle, to silence, to bring peace. In a storm, it's the wind that actually induces the waves. So we have two things. We've got the wind and the waves. The wind causes the wave to happen. So it's actually the wind's fault. Stop the wind, eventually the waves will cease also. Jesus rebuked the wind. He used the same term. We use the same term, rebuke, to what he did to demons. He rebuked the wind. This freak wind was something that scared a group of seasoned sailors, men who knew these waters well. This was no earthly storm. In scriptures, it's recorded 8 times, on 8 occasions, that people tried to kill Jesus. But he escaped. And the way he escaped actually also seems a bit supernatural. These people were being driven by something to kill him. Satan has even more reason to kill Jesus. There were many times in Scripture where we see that things were happening to hopefully make it so that Jesus wouldn't complete his mission. And Satan would try anything and everything to stop that mission. I believe this supernaturally induced storm was one such occasion. And Satan was trying to not only overturn the boat, but he was trying to overturn Jesus. And to stop his plan, his mission in this world. Jesus rebuked the wind and said to the waves, "Quiet! Be still!" The waves were just following the coercion of the wind. Many times in Scripture, people were just following the coercions of Satan, I believe. The ideas that he might have been putting in their heads. Disconnect the head, and the rest will be calmed down. At times, even the disciples were driven by something. It might have just been their emotion, it might have been their doubts, and they let them run away with them. Peter wanted to stop Jesus from completing his mission. And he got a similar rebuke. Can you remember Matthew chapter 16? Jesus turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns." At times, we might experience a bit of a rebuke from the Lord as well for our inappropriate, ungodly actions, when we might be marching in the opposite direction to God's plan. At other times, all we need is the still small voice of God saying, "Quiet, be still. Be still and know that I am God." Then the wind died down and it was completely calm. In the high sea adventure, Jesus revealed that he was in a league of his own to the 12. Calm as a cucumber, yet with all authority given to him by God. In the beginning, God spoke and the universe came into being. Surely we should have expected, they should have expected. It's nothing for him to calm a storm. Verse 40, he said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still not have faith?" As I said, they'd seen him do things. Every step of the way seemed to be a new thing on a new level. This was the first of 4 miracles in the Gospel of Mark that displayed different characteristics of the authority of Jesus to his disciples. How did they react after all of this happened? They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this?" I don't know if you've ever seen anybody, you met someone and you thought they were just a normal Joe, and then maybe they sit behind a piano and then they do something that is on another level. Or you meet someone, you don't know their background, and then, this happened to me once. When I was in Hungary, Joffy wanted me to learn to scuba dive. I wanted to learn to scuba dive. She said, "This is the year, this is your birthday, I'm going to pay for scuba diving lessons." So we organised it, and my scuba diving instructor was introduced to me. I got to know him a little bit. And then I saw him on television. I didn't realise that my scuba diving instructor was the chief communications officer for the police, the national police. Anytime anything of national importance comes on, he comes out and he's the one that talks to the press for the whole of Hungary. And I thought, oh, I didn't realise that's who you were. Sometimes we think Jesus is just a bloke. Sometimes we don't realise when we talk to him that we've got access to the creator of the universe. Sometimes we are in the disciple situation that we undermine or undervalue this God that we know so well, or we think we know so well. So this morning, if you can identify with any of these, if you can identify the panicking with the disciples in the windy storm, that's good. If you can identify with the wind, sometimes you're the sort of person that is furiously going around, sometimes finding yourself working against God's plan. It's good that you've realised that. If you have identified yourself as a wave, the third one, being blown around by other forces, by the influence of others, today recognise that. Right now, we are in the presence of Jesus, the man who can calm the storm, the man who will sometimes say, "Get on the right track." A rebuke will come. Sometimes we find ourselves as the wave, and he's saying, "Settle down. Stop following this way and that way. Stop following the world. Stop doing this. Time is too valuable to get emotional and to just throw a hissy fit. We have greater things to achieve, and these things are actually counterproductive. To settle. Quiet. Calm down. Let's get on with the mission." We as a church have a mission. We've got to gather together. We've got to consolidate the good things that we've got and the good things that we are. God has given every resource required for the task that is set before us. We are a powerful, formidable task with God in the center and us running around him, performing the acts of God. We've got to realise We've got to wake up and think, ooh, we have a job to do. We've got Jesus in our presence. In the weeks ahead, we're going to be learning a little bit more about Jesus. And I hope week by week, it's going to be a bit sobering. That we're not just playing church. We're not just a social club. Even though it's great to see that you guys love each other's company. It's wonderful to see that. And it's good. It is the glue between the bricks. It's kind of but we've got to get on with a job. I hope that each one of you will think, I want to hear what James is going to preach next week. I want to hear what Jesus did next week so that I can be enlightened some more. I want you to come every week and get enthusiastic because this God, this Jesus is saying, come to church. Don't give up the habit of meeting together every week. It is important that we do this for the sake of the job that we are called to do. You are more than the parts that you are made of. The synergy of us getting together and doing something big for God is more valuable today, I feel, than it's been last year, than it was the years before. We are coming to a crossroads in history where we will be filtered out, we will be sieved. People will, how do I put this? People will start to think, who are the people that I can trust, that I can value, that are honest to goodness people, that I can get information about the crises of this world? Who can I go to when things get messy and say, how do you stay connected? How do you stay sane? And we can point them to the one that makes us sane, Jesus Christ himself.